All right, so what we're going to do, okay, what we're going to do with this is we're going to go through with a video 32 through 35 because I believe those are the most challenging ones to do. So we're going to break down each one and give you different methods on how to do them. All right, so we'll start with 32, where they tell you H1 is 12, or H is 12 and H1 is 4. All right, so what I would look to do, number one, is see if we can use the geometric mean. And the altitude is the geometric mean of the sides of the hypotenuse. The second thing I would look for is PT, Pythagorean theorem. All right, the third thing is what we'll deal with 34 and 35, the last two problems. So in the first one, number 32, it says H is 12 and H1 is 4. All right, so when they give us two parts of the hypotenuse of the longest triangle, we can use the geometric mean to get A, the length of its altitude. So if that's 12 and that's 4, that's going to be 8. All right, so to get A, we multiply those together and do the square root. All right, and I would think of it as two ways. One, in the answer, simplify it. But number two, realize that when we use Pythagorean theorem, it might be easier to go back to that value. So A is 4 root 2. All right. So now that we have that, okay, we can use Pythagorean theorem to get L1 and L2. So in other words, to get L1, I would use Pythagorean theorem. 4 squared is 16. Square root of 32 squared is 32. And that's L1 squared using Pythagorean theorem. All right, 16 plus 32 is 48. Square root of 48 is 4 root 3. So L1 would be 4 root 3. We can do the same thing to get L2 using A and H2 or the whole triangle. I'm going to use 8 and root 32. 8 squared is 64. Square root of 32 squared is 32. 64 plus 32 is 96. All right, and the square root of 96 breaks down to 4 root 6. So that's the values there. All right. Similar idea with number 33. They give us A, which is 6, and they give us H2, which is 9. All right. Again, whenever they give us the altitude, two of the three, altitude and the two parts of the hypotenuse, we can use the idea that the altitude is the geometric mean in order to solve. So in other words, the long way would be 6 equals the square root of 9H1. All right, if we square both sides, 36 equals 9H1, and then H1 would be 4. All right, so if that's 4, again, we can use Pythagorean theorem now to get the legs. If I do the one on the left, 4 squared is 16, 6 squared is 36, 16 plus 36 is 52, square root of 52 simplifies down to 2 root 13, sorry. Same thing with L2. 6 squared is 36. 9 squared is 81. 36 plus 81 is 117. The square root of 117 simplifies down to 3 root 39. No, 3 root 13. All right, 3 root 13. All right. So that takes care of those. Now, when it gets tricky is 34 and 35 because we have to go beyond the altitude. So they tell us L1 is 6 root 3. All right. L1 is 6 root 3, and H2 is 3. Okay. Now, there's two ways of going about it. Okay. One way, all right, is using the idea of small leg, long leg, and hypotenuse of each triangle. All right. So I'm going to call the one on the left triangle 1, the one on the right triangle 2, and the whole thing triangle 3. All right. So for triangle 1, the one on the left, the small leg is H1. The larger leg is A, and the hypotenuse L1 is 6 root 3. All right. For the one on the right, the triangle number 2, the small leg is A. The longer leg is H2, which is 3. And then the hypotenuse is L2. And then finally, for the big triangle, The small leg is 6 root 3. The longer leg is the L2. All right. And then the hypotenuse would be obviously H. Now, there's two ways of going about it. Number one, all right, is identify the same variable that shows up twice, because those are going to be proportional. All right. So I set up a proportion. H1 over A equals A over 3. All right. It's kind of like systems. We're going to do substitution. We're going to solve for a variable. We're going to cross multiply. A squared equals 3H1. All right. Then A equals the square root of 3H1. All right. What that allows me to do, and I'm going to do this. First off, I'm going to make it bigger. All right. What that allows me to then do is go to triangle number 1 and use Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, because now A is in terms of square root of 3H1. So A squared, all right, H1 squared, the small leg, plus the square root of 3H1 squared equals the hypotenuse squared, which is 6 root 3 squared. All right. When I simplify my square roots, I'm going to have H1 squared. Square of a square root cancels out, plus 3H1 equals 108. And would you look at here, I got a quadratic. So H1 squared plus 3H1 minus 108 equals 0. All right. That factors into H1 plus 12, H1 minus 9. All right. Opposite of positive 12 is negative 12, which is extraneous. We can't have a negative side length. The opposite of negative 9 is 9. So that means H1 is 9. Okay, once I know H1 is 9, I go back and I make this 9. All right, now I can get all types of things. I can get A because it's the geometric mean of H1 and H2. 9 times 3 is 27. Square root of 27 simplifies down to 3 root 3. I could have also used Pythagorean theorem. All right, but that's for another day. All right, so, all right, I can now use the altitude and the parts of the hypotenuse to get L2. The hypotenuse of the second triangle or the middle triangle, 3 squared is 9, 3 root 3 squared is 27, 9 plus 27 is 36, square root of 36 is 6, so L2 would be 6, and then H would be 12. Okay? Now, the second way of doing it, and this to me is the easier way of doing it, but it's up to you. I'm giving you choices. Whatever you see is up to you. I'm going to leave, all right, my table of, okay, I'm going to leave my table. All right, I'm going to erase everything. So when I do it, I'm still going to have a quadratic. So those of you hoping to do it without quadratics, if you have another way of doing it, and that comes out to be the answer, fine. I know I've had people who've gotten answers. Anyway. Okay. I'll come back to that. All right. So here's the idea. All right. So I erase. For whatever reason, it's not erasing. Okay. I'm gonna have to use a different method. All right. So basically, what I'm gonna do instead is they're gonna tell me L1 is the 6 root 3. All right, and and then they tell me H2 is 3. All right. Good. Okay. So what that allows me to do possibly is rewrite H1 in terms of H. So what I mean by that is this. H1 can now be H the length of the whole thing minus 3. So instead of that being H1, that's H minus 3. Okay, that's H minus 3. Now if I erase some things, okay. All right, so I substituted that. So that means my H1. All right, why do I not have that somewhere else? All right, I'm gonna start all over, no big deal. All right, so now for the small triangle, the smaller leg is H minus 3, the longer leg is the altitude, and the hypotenuse is L1. All right, for the one on the right, the small leg is A, longer leg is the 3 they gave me, and then the hypotenuse is L2. And then for the entire triangle, the smaller leg is the L1, which is the 6 root 3. All right, I'm going to put the same thing up here, 6 root 3. The long leg is the L2, and then the hypotenuse is the H. Okay, what that allows me to do, and this is what we talked about in period 1, I don't think we discussed it as much in period 8, all right, is now we can set up a proportion where everything's in terms of H. So in other words, H minus 3, the small leg of the small triangle, over 6 root 3, the small leg of the big entire triangle, equals 6 root 3, the hypotenuse, all right, the hypotenuse of the smaller triangle over H. All right, I cross multiply, H squared minus 3H. All right. H2 is 3. H squared minus 3H equals the 108. H squared minus 3H. All right. Minus 108 equals 0. H plus H minus 12. H plus 9 equals 0. So now I got 12 for H. So that means H equals 12. The negative 9 would be canceled out since it can't be that. So this is now 12, making that 9, and boom, we're ready to go from there. All right, so either way, you end up with a quadratic. All right, same idea with the last one. Okay, H1 is the 5. L2 is the 2 root 51. So when I set up my table, small leg, long leg, hypotenuse, for triangle 1 on the left, triangle 2 on the right, triangle 3 is the whole thing. Triangle 1, the small leg is the H1, which is given to you as 5. The long leg, which is going to stay at A. And then the hypotenuse is the L1. All right. For the one on the right, the small leg is A. All right. The long leg is H2. All right. And the hypotenuse is 2 root 51. And then for the entire triangle, the small leg is L1. The long leg is the L2, which is 2 root 51. And the hypotenuse is H. All right. H2, if you look at this, is the entire hypotenuse, take away the 5. So H minus 5, which means I can take for the H2 and substitute that with H minus 5. And just like in the last one, I can now set up a ratio in terms of H. So H minus 5 over 2 root 51 equals 2 root 51 over H. Cross multiply, H squared minus 5H equals 204, because when I multiply 2 root 51 by itself, that's what I get. Get it in standard form, H squared minus 5H minus 204 equals 0. That factors, ladies and gentlemen, to h minus 17, h plus 12 equals 0. All right, the opposite of negative 17 is 17. The opposite of positive 12 is negative 12. All right, that's going to be extraneous. So that makes that 17. All right, which makes H2 12. All right, A would be the square root of 5 times 12, which is 60. Pull out the 4, and you got 2 root 15. Once you have that, you can use Pythagorean theorem to get L1. 5 squared is 25. 2 square root of 15 squared is 60. That becomes the square root of 85. Boom shakalaka, you got all your side lengths. All right. I hope that clarified things. Feel free to ask any questions about that at the beginning of class. All right. But you may be able to check that. It may help clarify things. I know a bunch of people ask questions about those, and we will pick it up there when we start the lesson the next time we see each other. Take care. Enjoy yourself. Bye.